Welcome to Keep the Hotel Empty. Today we've kept the hotel empty to welcome back a dear friend to the show, Ben Bakker. For those that have watched the previous episodes, you'll remember Ben as a fundamental member of the band In Transit. But today we're actually not going to talk music, which is a little weird. But we get to put on, we should say rather, we get to have Ben have the chance to put on his other hat of commercial real estate world. Very dichotomous life you have, my friend.
Yep. Got to have a real job to pay for the fun job, right?
Yeah, right. As Intel Rock and Roll, it turns out to be some kind of unexpected gold mine again or something.
Guitars are really expensive. You have to buy them somehow.
Yeah, right. I have nothing to do with that. So ceremoniously, we like to press rewind. But at this point, I don't really know where we would press rewind to in your story, because this seems like something you've been at since go. So talk to me about where commercial real estate comes into your life, and then I would like for you to kind of give us the framework of how this whole thing works, because, again, for people who have watched the show in the past, we've had all residential real estate people on from various walks of that whole ladder. So I'm very interested in what similarities exist and then, of course, what differences there are. So I guess start me at go and we'll roll the first dice.
Sure, absolutely. And thanks for having me again.
Of course, man.
I love your show. I watch it all the time, and I'm honored to be back on it. I kind of joke with people that I stumbled into commercial real estate, to be quite honest. I had a career in, believe it or not, sign sales. I worked in the sign sales industry from the ground up for, I think, close to 13 years.
Dang.
From customer service to graphic design to installation, wrapping vehicles and stuff like that, and boats, and then moved into sales and management.
What led you into that? Were you doing graphic design in high school? Or things
I was into design, and when my first child was born, I was a bartender, and fun job. But I was like, okay, I'm a father now. I can't be getting home at 2:30 in the morning, soaked in sour beer and whiskey. I need a 9-to-5 job. And I was like, well, what do I enjoy doing? I enjoy design. I enjoy art. I enjoy the arts. And a friend of a friend knew a local sign company that was hiring. So I just kind of showed up and said, hey, I don't know anything about this industry, but I want to learn.
Nice.
Right. And they were kind enough to give me a job, and I literally started at the bottom. The last company I was at was a large-scale commercial sign company. So, when you see hospitals and hotels and things like that with, major 30-foot tall signs out front, I was handling the sales and installation of those and doing really well at it and very, very happy. But how commercial real estate entered into this whole thing was my family. My father was an entrepreneur. He started a company here in Sarasota in 1977.
Well, that's like ancient history here now, the way time moves here.
A manufacturing company for bicycles, tricycles, and then eventually he expanded it into lawnmowers and edgers. And it was a very, very successful business. He grew it very carefully and methodically over decades. He was smart with his finances, and one of the things he did when the company would do well would invest it in commercial real estate. That was one of the things he did. So he would, every now and then he would buy some commercial land, or he would buy a small office building, and then as the years went on, he would buy a medium-sized office building, and then an industrial building, and then he started dabbling in development with partners. Which, as I was growing up as he was doing all this, and I was paying zero attention, like zero interest, had no interest in any of that or anything else. Even with his actual manufacturing company, I have 3 brothers, and, my mom and my dad were never the kind of people like, well, you guys need to take over the family business. They were very open with hey, you guys go do what you want, make your own way, make your own road. If you want to be part of the family business, we can start you in learning that. And myself and all of my brothers, not for anything negative, but myself and all of my brothers were like, no, that's kind of not where we want to find ourselves. So we all have made our own way. But fast forward to 2008, 2009, right? The real estate crash.
I was going to say, when the rubber hit the road.
I was doing just fine in my job. Obviously, large commercial sale signs were a little challenging because there wasn't a lot of building going on.
Right.
We probably made all of our money by bank signs because, banks were closing and reopening like every other night.
Yeah.
So we would go put up a bank sign and, 6 weeks later, they're bought by somebody else. So we'd go take it down and put up a new sign on the same wall. But
and nobody thought about that. The side effect of that was bank sign business was doing all right.
The bank sign business was doing great. But in all of that, right, in that crash, my father's manufacturing business obviously took a hit, right? The economy went down, spending went down, production went down. So, they were really kind of grinding it out. At the same time, due to the, economic situations, all of the tenants in the properties that he had were either closing up, boarding up shop or moving out or just skipping town or begging him like, we're in a really bad spot. We need to renegotiate our lease. We need a 30% price cut if we're going to stay here. And so he was having a horrible time keeping his own business going and trying to manage, these assets that he had grown over 30 years that had,
changed
kind of been
almost
taking
overnight.
care of themselves, but then with the crash, right? And the real kicker was he had done an industrial development project, which he had financed through a bank, obviously. And it was just in that period where the construction was done. There were no tenants in the building because he hadn't gotten a CO yet. And the bank that did the deal, the financing for the project, if I remember correctly, was the very first bank where the FDIC came in and raided it and shut it down, right? And shut the whole bank down. So as, we all learned through the 2008, 2010 crisis, those banks that were getting shut down, all of their mortgages were being sold off to other people, right? And the mortgage on that property got sold to some other bank in some other state, and they called him up and said, "Hey, we're the new owners of your mortgage on this property. We don't like the terms, so we're going to give you all new terms." And obviously my father was like, "These are terrible terms."
Of course.
If I would have, if these are the terms that were given to me on day one, I would have never built this development because it would be stupid,
right,
financially. But they kind of had the upper hand on it.
Oh man, that was a weird predatory time.
So my mother and father are probably genuinely scared for the first time in their life for everything they've worked so hard for.
Right.
And in the middle of all of this, my father gets a terrible health scare. So suddenly, it really dark days for the family, right? I'm a person of faith, and I think that every now and then the promptings you get are leading you in the right directions that you should go in, right? And I'll never forget, I was dropping my kids off in the car line at school, elementary school. I was at the traffic light getting ready to head down the interstate on my way to work, and I just very clearly heard in my spirit, your family needs help. Your father needs help. And I'm thinking to myself, in what? I don't know anything about the factory,
Right.
I wouldn't even know what to do. And
do they need a sign?
Yeah. I wouldn't be any good to them. I already made their sign.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, all of the properties that my dad has, I don't know, maybe I could help there. I know he lost his property manager and he's trying to do it all himself, and he's, getting up there in years. And so I just kind of followed my gut and followed my spirit and called my dad up and said, let me take you out to lunch. So I did. And I said, "Hey, listen, I know you and Mom are in a really bad spot. And I know you're struggling. And I know when you need help, and so I don't know what I can do for you guys, but I want to do something to help.
Right.
And maybe that's, I'll work part-time to help you manage these properties and get things up to snuff and cleaned up and get your tenant issues fixed. I said, I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And to my surprise, my father kind of let out a big sigh of relief, and he was like, we could really use that help. Like, we could really use that help, and I would really appreciate it, and we'll figure it out together. You can learn together. So with that, I spent the next probably 2 years working part-time still for the sign company and working part-time for my dad. So probably doing like 30 hours a week at each job. And to my surprise, I really enjoyed it. Like, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed getting in there and being with people and meeting people and working through problems and solutions and cleaning up the properties. And so after, a while, my father sat me down and he said, you're doing a really good job. Like, I'm really happy with you've really taken to this. He said, I'm paying a real estate agent to lease all these properties out and find tenants. He said, it seems kind of silly. You're doing a good job managing. Why don't you go and get a real estate license and you can lease the properties? I might as well, keep it in the family. And
had you thought about that at all before he said that?
Not at all. The realtors that he had leasing those properties and working on them, I had good relationships with. And so it was a perfectly good relationship, but I was like, okay, new challenge. I'll try that. And so I did. I ended up just, studying for the license and taking the test and getting my license to take that over. And I thought that the extent of my real estate career would just be taking care of those, 6 or 8 family properties. But the funny thing was that I had made so many great relationships in sign sales and in networking and being a really active member of like the Manatee Chamber of Commerce, the Sarasota Chamber of Commerce, the Lakewood Ranch Business Alliance. Right?
You were doing all that whilst doing the sign work?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you're in sign sales, you got to be networking, you got to be meeting people, you got to be creating relationships. And so I when I got my license, you have to hang it somewhere, right? And I looked into different brokerages that I felt could give me the best opportunity to learn and train. Mm-hmm. And I ended up at Michael Saunders and Company here in downtown Sarasota. And when I sent out that first little postcard to my Rolodex from the sign company of like, hey, by the way, I'm doing commercial real estate now, my phone just started ringing like crazy of all of these people I had sold signs to throughout the years. And they're like, you're doing commercial real estate now? Like, we're looking for some new office space, or we're looking to find some, industrial space out east, or, I've got some land that my family has had in a commercial area for sale. We want to sell it. Can you do that? And almost right out of the gate, I started having more work outside of my family circle than I could do inside my own family's properties. Obviously, I took care of those as well. And I mean, that was a surprising and huge testament to the power of networking and the power of relationships and the power of just, being a part of the community, because I was fortunate to launch just with business already in hand because of all of those relationships I had made in the sign sales industry. It was wild. I was very fortunate.
And did part of you, were you taken aback by that? Or okay.
I was very surprised. I'm like, where's all this work coming from? Funny enough, as the economy stabilized, we got all the properties, the family properties cleaned up. We got them leased out. We got practically every single retail and office and industrial property basically 100% leased. And everything was humming along great, and the economy was on the rise again. And I got so busy with the remainder of work that my little brother actually had to come in and step in and take over property management,
nice.
for my mom and dad, because I'm like, I don't have time for this anymore. Like, I can't give you the attention I need because I'm running all over all over the place with, the work that's coming in.
That brings up two questions. I want to ask this one first. In hindsight, you said you made a very operative point there. A lot of people talk about networking, but really you did networking, and you also said building relationships with people. In hindsight, what do you think with your interactions with these people you were doing business with, selling signs, what do you think with them helped them feel like you had a quality relationship with them? So when you said, hey, I'm doing commercial real estate, their answer wasn't, cool story, bro.
Right.
It was, oh man, we would love to do some business with you.
Right. When I first got into the sales game, I spent a good while studying networking, studying sales, read a lot of books on how to network. And man, some of those books were solid gold. Because I'm sure a lot of us have been to quote unquote networking events where everybody's just standing around with, a glass of red wine, awkwardly looking at each other like, well, what do you do? Well, what do you do? And here's my card and here's my card. And, those are not fun, right?
Yeah.
And if you approach those kind of events instead with a mindset of hey, we're all trying to sell a widget. We're all here, right? There's the ratio of sales account executives to actual business owners in this room is probably 10 to 1.
Yeah.
There's no actual decision makers in this room. Let's enjoy our time together. So I would always make a point when I was with people not to be like, oh, Eric, tell me about what you do. What do you sell? Tell me about your company. Instead, he might mention something about a soccer game, and I'm like, oh, your kids play sports. My kids play sports. How's it going? Where do they play at? How's your coach? How's Little League going? Because they would much rather talk about their kids' Little League than talk about
the widget
selling flux capacitors all day, right?
Yeah, right.
And just spending time to make a connection with that guy instead of his job, right? Now, as the conversation went on, I'm like, by the way, tell me what you do, right? Okay, that's what you sell. That's good to know. Obviously, I don't need to buy that right now, but maybe I know somebody that will one day.
Right.
Right? Or at some point, I'm going to need that, and I'm going to remember that you and I met and we had a great interaction, and I really enjoyed your company, and I really enjoyed talking to you. I remembered that you liked soccer, right? And so I really started to change how I would interact with people of, let me just go get to know the people, right? And let me just create friendships and create relationships. And I'll make sure that they know what I do and who I work for and what I sell. But I'm not going to run up to them and be like, hi, I'm Ben. Let me sell you this thing, right? Because it's annoying.
Was that something that was instinctual for you, and as you started doing it, it was like, okay, this is working? Or was that something you picked up from the research that you did before you got your toe in this pool?
From the research, I don't think I would have known to do that initially. I think when I first started, I was just doing the same awkward thing that everybody else was doing.
Right.
Right. And so I think in changing that to that philosophy, it does not yield quick results. It does not, right? But if you are out there long enough and making an impact with people and creating positive interactions, I mean, the side benefit is you make a lot of great friends. You meet new people, and you get to expand your social circle, right? I have so many friends now that I'm genuine friends with that I just met on the, Chamber of Commerce happy hour cocktail circuit of all of us having to be there, right? Because you just genuinely find things that are going on. But it's like, I want to communicate to make sure you know what I do, but I'm not going to try to force you to buy something or talk about it because you're, and eventually 4 months down the road, I would get a call from him. He's like, hey, it's Steve. Remember me? We were talking about soccer. I'm like, yeah, how's it going? How are the kids? And stuff like that. He's like, good. But hey, I actually need this service that you provide now, or my uncle does, and I wanted to connect the two of you. And that philosophy has paid off, and I still use it to this day, and I'll never break from it.
Well, that actually, I'm going to mission drift before we get to question 2. Then that begs the question. There's two. The way I kind of look at sales, or the way I kind of see sales, is there's two two kinds of sides to it. You can manipulate someone to the point where you can take their money and they don't realize it, or you can get to the point where you have a relationship where they can want to give you their money and then it's all over but the celebrating, basically.
Right.
What do you think is the fundamental reason why there is such that fork in the road? And the reason why I ask this is because, especially in real estate or anything where you're talking high-end, high-ticket things like that, being an aggressive salesperson, trying to say that the first thing you're going to say is, I'm Ben and I sell this, and how can I sell it to you?
Yeah.
What makes it so, what do you feel like is the dividing line between that, and why do you feel that it's important for you to be on the side you've chosen to be on? Not that there's a right or wrong, just like the curious nature, the dichotomy of sales.
I have found through my own experiences. I mean, I'm a lifer here in this area, right? And I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. So I over the last, I guess 13, 14 years in commercial real estate now, I have had many instances where I could have gotten a deal done and gotten paid, and it probably would have been messy, and at the end of the day probably both sides of the table wouldn't have been happy, or I can go to my client, maybe in this case they're the seller or the landlord, and let them know, I don't think this is the right move. Like, I know we've got somebody here, I think it's going to end badly, and I know you want to make a sale or you want to get a lease signed, and I want to make the sale and I want to get a lease signed and get paid.
Right.
But if you hired me to lease an office space for you and I brought you a tenant that was throwing up red flags like here and there throughout the whole process, I can, I could maybe just say, well, it's, not my issue. My job is to bring a tenant, and bring you that tenant.
Exactly.
And now you as a landlord have got this headache tenant that's making your life miserable. Maybe you're trying to get them to chase rent, or they leave in the middle of the night and it's a horrible experience. You got a tenant. I got the deal done and performed. I got a commission out of it. Are you ever going to hire me again? Never, right? If you will remember, though, of me saying, hey, I know you want a tenant. I know you're going to get this space filled, but this guy's throwing off, red flags, and I think we need to pass and we need to wait for something better, and I want to find you somebody that you're going to be happy with. And if you give that extra time and attention, you will fill that space up. You will get at least, that landlord will be happy, and that landlord will remember that you wanted to take good care of him, right? And so when the time comes and another space opens up, he's going to call you back and say, I used you before, I'd like to use you again. And that way you turn one job into 10 jobs, right? By just
so playing the long game seems to be...
Playing the long game, 100%.
I was going to say that seems to be a fundamental part of your philosophy in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, now I'm going to cycle back to the one before. You said, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was going to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's a powerful part to have in your personality when you're going to do things like follow your gut and jump into waters you're not familiar with. How did you get comfortable with that, or what do you think makes that something that you can use as operatively in your life?
That's a really good point. Funny enough, we all know that when you want to get a real estate license, you have to study a course on real estate. You have to take an exam on real estate, and you have to do continuing education to keep your license. But what a lot of people don't know is if I want to do commercial real estate, I have to take a 68-hour course on selling houses. And then I have to take a 4-hour exam on selling houses. And then I get a license to be a realtor, which allows you to do residential and commercial. But I remember the testing site going, congratulations, you passed your exam, you're a realtor. And I'm like, thanks, I still have no idea. I'm never going to sell a single solitary house for my entire life, yet I just took a 68-hour course on it. And it's quite surprising that there's not a separate course for commercial real estate and a separate exam for commercial real estate. So that being said, when I had to hang my license somewhere, I tried to find the best place that had the best training program, right? Again, and trying to find a real estate company here in Manatee and Sarasota County that would be willing to train in this industry was way harder than I thought.
Why do you think that was?
I don't know to this day. But luckily, I went and spoke to the commercial division manager at Michael Saunders and Company at the time. He's a wonderful human being. We're still very close to this day. And I was just straight with him. I said, listen, I don't even know what I don't know. I need to be with somebody who knows what they're doing. I realize I'm not going to make any money, but I'd like to be an apprentice, because to me, if I have to spend 6 or 8 months or a year under this person, basically working for free, the knowledge I will get, it will be worth its weight in gold. And so he said, I have an agent here who mainly works the Lakewood Ranch area. She's one of our best and brightest, and she's open to doing that. Her name was Susan Goldstein. She's still at Michael Saunders. She's like still the top producer year after year after year. And so she basically let me apprentice under her for the first 2, maybe 3 years I was in the business. And I just walked alongside her and accompanied her and, went to showings. As I was getting my own work, I was working with her. And she was just so helpful into showing me the ropes, right? And just, again, we're still incredibly close to this day. She was a wonderful teacher, and she probably didn't have to be as nice to me as she was. So,
shout out to Susan and all the Susans like her.
I'm incredibly grateful for that, and I'm incredibly grateful that I had somebody who's that successful to show me the ropes, because I learned a lot of really good habits out of the gate. And after a while, I was kind of able to take my training wheels off and go out on my own and stand on my own 2 feet pretty well. But even at that point, right, Susan and I kind of had a almost unspoken arrangement of respect to one another, in the fact of if somebody called me and wanted some work done in the Lakewood Ranch area, I would say, you need to call my friend Susan.
Right.
Right? Like, I'm not going to go into her quote-unquote territory. And we don't really have territories, but people don't have like territories in that aspect, but they do have kind of epicenters where they just do a lot more work.
Right.
Right.
It's
like
just
for me,
inevitable.
That's downtown Bradenton. I don't know why, but I do a tremendous amount of work in the urban core of downtown Bradenton. I go everywhere, all over the Tampa Bay area, but I just seem to have, an area of gravity there. So I would send that to her as a sign of respect.
Right.
Call my friend Susan. She knows Lakewood Ranch inside and out. Right. And likewise, when somebody she knew in Lakewood Ranch would call for Bradenton or something west of 301, she would send them to me. And we would just trade it back and forth as a show of respect for one another. And she was probably the most upset when I delivered the news that I was going to be leaving, Michael Saunders after 10 years. She was, really heartbroken. I felt like I was leaving a really close friend.
Right.
But we still talk all the time. We still go out to lunch every few months and, keep our friendship open.
Well, and that lots of people that we have in here will talk about the importance of having mentors, either how mentors have been for them or mentoring that they've been able to do for others. How different do you think your path would have been had you not had someone to mentor you like that?
I've seen it. I see it in this industry. People who try to do this without mentors or without relationships, honestly, just kind of tend to struggle and flounder and aren't really in it long. I think the 2 most important keys to success in this industry are creating relationships and being humble enough to learn from people who are better at it than you are, and finding somebody who's better at it than you are and being willing to sit and learn from that person.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because that was going to be my next question. What gave you the ability to have the foresight to be humble, to say, I have to take a step back here. If I have to quote unquote work for free, the knowledge I get is going to be worth that. That's a sign of humility. being able to look in the mirror and say, I've got some work to do. This is how I can get it done.
Right.
How did you develop that character?
I think it was almost more dictated to me because commercial real estate can be very intimidating.
How so?
Very intimidating.
Just because of the numbers?
Yeah. The scale, the sheer size of numbers, the type of people you're dealing with. I don't mean difficult. I mean dealing with incredibly successful, multi-million dollar developers who are doing huge commercial products and projects and things of that nature, or really seasoned investors, and suddenly the price tags of the jobs you're working at are going up and up and up, and it's definitely an intimidating field. And so, I was like, no, I don't want to try to figure this out myself. I need to learn from somebody. I need to learn from somebody who knows what they're doing, and just sit quietly and watch.
Do a lot of people in the real estate world hang in residential realty because of that, and try to climb the ladder of selling bigger, residential property, because that tops out still at a spot that's beneath the sort of interactions that you're going to have in the commercial real estate world?
I think I get what you're asking. I think maybe the draw in residential, my old boss from Michael Saunders said something once that I'll never forget. He said, I want you to realize, when it comes to real estate, residential realty is a microwave and commercial real estate is a crock pot. In residential realty, the turnaround time from contract to close and sale is pretty fast. And it's probably anywhere from 30 to 60 days and you're done, right? Last year, I just finished an apartment development project, and from the day I took that thing to market and went under contract, the day we closed was like 3.5 years.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So you have to be patient, right? Obviously, the sale is higher, the numbers are higher, the payout is higher, but when you divide that by 40 hours a week for 3.5 years, right, it evens out. So I think the draw of residential real estate is, even though maybe you're dealing in smaller numbers, they're consistent, they're constant, they're turning over quickly. And the other thing is, like that development project, you can put 9, 11, 18 months into something, and then it doesn't go through. And then you've lost 18 months of work on a project, and you have to be willing to stomach that. The first few times that happened to me,
I was just going to say, what was it like the first time that happened to you, when you realized you just squandered 18 months or whatever?
I was physically sick. Like, it was a job. It was a job I was working on. I had probably put 8 or 9 months into it, and like hours a day. Like, I was probably just on this one little job putting, 10, 15 hours a week just into that. Besides all my other business, because it was going to be a great deal. And then it just sputtered out and caved in. And here I am, 8 or 9 months later, literally nothing to show for all the time. Does it
seem unreal the first time? Like, this can't actually be happening?
But you know what? The second time it happens, you're a little more calm. And the third time, and then you get into a mindset of like, okay, this is a big project. I'm dazzled by the dollar signs that could potentially be at the end of it, but it could go either way. The point is, we've all got to have cool, level heads, and we realize that this transaction may work out, it may not work out. It either will or it won't. I think that's another, attractor to me for commercial real estate. It is pretty devoid of emotion. Buying and selling a house, that comes with a lot of emotion.
Right.
You're dealing with families, moms, dads who are going to raise kids and have puppies and get married in this house, and there's so much emotion attached to buying a home because it's a life and it's a family and it's your personality, right? So I get and I understand why there's a lot of emotion in that industry. Commercial real estate, on the other side of the coin, is just math.
I was going to say straight X's and O's, huh?
Yeah, like what, X, Y, does it equal out to a number I like? Good, let's move forward. Does it equal out to a number I don't like? Then we're not moving forward. No Nobody gets upset. Nobody gets hurt. It either works or it doesn't. And if it works, we move forward. If it doesn't, we move on and look for somebody else.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, commercial or residential real estate is an emotional endeavor.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So when you're doing these properties and you got the first one that shits the bed and you got to learn to take these and get better with it. When you're having one that sits for 3.5 years or a project that you grind on that long, is it just a matter of going through that keeps you from having a crisis of faith and being able to sleep at night? Or how is it that, I mean, that seems like a long time to have something that you're heavily invested into be up in the air.
Yeah, I have slowly developed, or I'm still trying to develop nerves of steel, right?
Yeah.
Like you almost just have to detach yourself from the finish line. When you're dealing with a project that's that long, for your own sanity, you just have to be like, hey, there's literally like 72 steps I have to go through from the time we go under contract to the time the dotted line is. So today we're just going to focus on the tasks we need to do for today, and we're going to get those done properly. And that's going to lead to the next step. And that's going to lead to the next. And we're just going to focus on getting what we need done today. We're not going to worry about the end, because if we do the steps that are needed to get done right now for this project, then we'll make it to the next, right? If I'm worried about 5 steps from now, I could screw up this step.
Right.
So just take a deep breath, keep your calm, and focus on what's in front of you to get that completed. And if you just worry about that, those other steps will start to take care of themselves, and then suddenly you'll wake up one morning and realize that you're a whole lot closer to the finish line.
And then you can derive some ease from that.
I before this career, I was a very impatient person. This career has taught me tremendous levels of patience.
You're totally reading my mind here, because I was just going to ask you. It seems like you're a pretty patient person. You got patience power going on for you here. Have you always been patient?
Never. No. I wanted it now. I wanted it done right away. Very bull in a china shop, personality.
Yeah. So how do you start to discipline? Did you give yourself patience as a discipline, as something you could use by force? You had no other choice but to realize, I have to take this day by day.
I think the quality of patience, I don't want to give myself credit that's not due.
Yeah.
I didn't choose to learn patience because I'm saying I was forced, kicking and screaming, to change my way of thinking, just through things not going my way, and realizing that I kind of needed to rewire how I emotionally approach my career, in my day-to-day job.
Right. So let's kind of transition a little bit, and I know we've touched on some of this, but I want you to kind of outline for me what you see as like the big differences between commercial and residential real estate, and where you kind of see the state of affairs now, especially as it relates to Florida, with how these businesses are going. It seems like, and we've had a couple different people in here, it seems like we've got two kind of narratives at play. One where they're kind of tied together and things are slowing down. And then the other one where it's like, well, they're not going to create any more paradise and there's still fantastic business opportunities here. So people are flooding in and everything is still attractive.
Yeah.
So kind of lay out some framework where we're at.
I definitely have opinions on this. I want to temper my statement with, I try to pay close attention to residential real estate and the residential markets enough to be dangerous and know what's going on, because what you've heard from your previous guests on the show, commercial and residential are tied together in a way. And what I've learned is that commercial tends to follow residential. In other words, if the residential market in our area starts to pick up steam, as a rule, commercial activity tends to pick up 6 to 8 months behind it. Ergo, if the residential market starts to go down, right, commercial eventually tends to follow it. That's where I'm grateful, because I can kind of read the tea leaves early, right? If I start seeing things moving in a certain direction, especially if it's a downward trend in residential, I can start to prepare myself. Like I can start operating differently and, planning differently, maybe, minding my acorns for the winter a little better, you know? So as a rule, that tends to happen. And it's because, I mean, if you think about it, right? Let's take Parrish, for example, right? Between here and St. Pete. I don't think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, anybody figured what was happening in Parrish right now would be happening with just the absolute explosion of home building out there.
I was going to say they're trying to build like whole neighborhoods and stuff.
It's crazy. It's wild to see. Like, I don't go out to Parrish that often, but when I do, I feel like I'm driving around with my jaw open. Like, I can't. None of these houses were here 6 months ago, right? And it's going so fast. But Parrish was a lot of just fields and farm, if anything. And suddenly they built a massive amount of homes because the demand was just off the charts of people moving into our state. So you had demand. They created supply, right? Especially in Parrish. But what happens when you build 5,000 homes and there's not a Publix? There's not a place to get a slice of pizza or to get your oil changed or to go get a gallon of milk, right?
That was exactly what Tony and Debbie said.
Well, I live in Parrish. I got a new house. It's really affordable, and I got to drive 35 minutes to get a gallon of milk, right? And it's miserable. Now we're seeing, when you drive down 301, all of these shopping centers and commercial developments and these infill are going in, all these neighborhood centers, the Starbucks and the pharmacies and all the things that you need, you know, within 10 to 15 minutes of your home just to live your life. And so kind of commercial tends to follow that. As far as the state of our market, you know.
Or just kind of what narrative is really at play here, do you think?
Everybody wants to try to guess the future.
Yeah, exactly. And I know there's so much of this nobody's clairvoyant thing.
I think, in my own personal opinion, I don't think we are going through a downward move in residential. I think that from 2021 to 2024, we had a wonderful run. We had a whole lot of people move here. The vast majority of them stayed here and put down roots. That led to a lot of people wanting homes. We had a dip in interest rates, which made everybody jump on buying. It was just all of those things were in play that made for a really hot, really fast market. That means home prices go up, right? If there's more demand, increase the price of your home. You'll sell it for more. That's only going to last so long before it's like, okay, let's come to our senses, right? So people are talking about price drops on homes. I think they're really just adjusting them back to where they probably should have been in the first place.
Yeah, because it was banana boats.
Right. And the interest rates ended up going up. So now the number of people who had cheaper money, it's not so cheap anymore, so they're not as quick to jump into a transaction, right? So everything is just kind of leveling off. I think it's going to move around a little bit. I think that home prices are going to fluctuate a little bit, not a lot. I think the interest rates will probably come down a little bit more, but
historically we're still pretty low.
Yeah, thinking that we'll ever get back to 3-4%, I think is silly. I think that was a short, very one-time term thing. I think interest rates being in the 5s and 6s for the foreseeable futures is probably actually normal. And because of that, commercial real estate's activity has slowed down too, but in the last 6 months, absolutely seen an uptick. I'm far busier than I was 6 months ago, but everybody's still a little hesitant too, right? Because no matter how you feel about it, there's talk of tariffs and trade things like this and labor supply, and when you're in commercial and you're building an apartment complex, right? If suddenly, concrete might end up getting more expensive or the interest rates might end up getting up, like those are things you take into account, right?
They inflate that bottom line quick.
Because, when you get into building an apartment, that's a 3-year process. So you need to be transitioning out like, okay, how much do window panes cost today and how much are window panes going to cost in 6 months, because I need to order, 3,400 window panes for this apartment building. And so those things really come into play. And so people who are developing right now they're not canceling their projects. They're just kind of watching and waiting. Like, is this going to go through? Is this going to shake itself out? Are things going to, level out? I kind of feel like we're just in a big economic game of chicken right now.
Yeah.
And it will either pan out or it won't. Like, it doesn't matter how you feel about it anymore.
Right.
Here we are. It's either going to work or it's not. We all hope it works. And if it does, all of these, developers and builders or these business owners who are thinking of opening up a second or a third store, right, will be able to go, okay, at least now I know things have settled. Now we know what the road is going to look like going to go forward. And I think we'll see another really big surge in commercial real estate going forward. But for right now, it's actually going really good. All of the industry colleagues that I speak to on a regular basis, everybody's feeling good. Like we're not high-fiving and the market's so great and it's wonderful, but nobody's doom and glooming down in the dumps either.
Well, Florida's still a great place to do business.
Exactly. Like no matter what the rest of the country is like, Florida's going to Florida.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. If you want to start a business, this is a great place to do it.
And that was the other thing I learned that they said, like, however it goes nationally, it's like 10x in Florida. So if the market is going good in the U.S., it's going great in Florida. And if the market is going bad nationally, it's horrible in Florida. We seem to be an exaggerated state of whatever is happening nationally, and
that's
it
fun.
is what it is.
That's fun.
Yeah.
We got that on all fronts, whether or not we're talking about bath salts or commercial real estate.
I would have to agree there.
We get to operate in the extremes. I want to circle back because you mentioned something that Tony Barrett and Debbie Reynolds had mentioned when they were in here, because they were
great folks, both of them.
Yeah, they were talking about exactly what you were saying, expanding these neighborhoods so quickly, but the infrastructure for them not being there. Why do you think that's the case? Just because nobody's going to make an investment to try to make money until the people are there? Or what? Because it seems like commercial following residential, even 6 to 8 months behind, almost seems like antithetical in some ways.
That's a great question, and the answer is something I've learned in my years. So for commercial development, like let's just stick with the parish example, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's a good little experiment here. Commercial developers, when they're planning on how things are going to work, let's just say Publix, for example. Publix is a great example here. I've worked with them a few times and I've learned a lot from them. Is commercial development like that, or even commercial users like a Publix or McDonald's or Starbucks, right? Another great example. They are very, very methodical and very scientific and mathematical in how they pick their locations and what they're going to do. And so and this has happened to me in the past, I have been on property tours with Publix, and I have shown them properties, and I've told them, okay, it's kind of quiet now, but I can tell you that there's an apartment complex breaking ground over here that'll be open in a year and a half. There's a residential project going on here. All of these places are getting done. There's a school being built over here and a hospital being built over here within the next 5 years. And then the city's putting in a park over here.
Right.
Like, you're looking around now and it's pretty quiet, but I'm telling you that 5 years or less, the population in this area is going to triple, and they need a grocery store because there's not one within 3.5 miles.
Right.
And Publix comes back and says, it doesn't matter, the demographics aren't there right now. So these, a Starbucks will not commit to a site until they run the demographic reports and find out that there are this many families living in this 1.5 mile radius, that the traffic counts going to and from work are above, 45,000 between 8 and 10.
Dang.
And that the average, household income of this area hits a certain amount. And when all those boxes get checked, Starbucks grabs the property or Publix, commits to a site. So
So they just have a set of criteria, and whenever it gets ticked, that's where they move into.
It is numbers.
Regardless.
Yep. And as the population grows, so now, if you would have gone to Starbucks or Wendy's, 3 years ago and shown them Parrish, they'd be like, you should go here because there's all these neighborhoods that are slated. They'd be like, we'll wait. And when all the houses finally go up and they're all in there, they're like, okay, now we're interested. So that is why, we've had so much population in Parrish for the last 3-4 years, but we're just now starting to see Lowe's and Walmart and McDonald's all showing up in those areas because now the numbers and the traffic counts and the area median income are all matching the demographics that they corporately need to invest in that site.
So just from a commercial investment standpoint, there's just no way to justify making that investment on the front side.
Right. Publix was like, we don't care that you're telling us that's going to happen. We're not going to roll the dice and build a $36 million grocery store in this site because you're pretty sure that everything's going to,
So does the flip side to that ever happen? I know this isn't necessarily arena, but I know it's something you know about. Does the flip side of that ever happen where you build a neighborhood and it's a fucking ghost town for 3 years or whatever?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've seen it happen. Again, we talk about economic peaks and valleys, right. In real estate, because, it's just real estate. It is going to go up and it is going to go down. The only thing you don't know is when, but real estate will always go like this. So, as long as you're good with roller coasters, come on in. But, when you're talking about ground up development, ground up construction, whether it is a shopping mall or a neighborhood, that takes time, right? You have to find the site. You have to get the site permits, do the site planning, put in the infrastructure, the sewers, the plumbing, the roads, the telephone lines,
yeah, that's
the electrical
exactly
lines.
what Debbie and
that takes
Tony were saying.
So long. And then you've got to get all the, sites platted for the homes. And then a lot of times, especially with home developers now, right, they don't start building until they have a certain amount of people committed to get their financing, right? All of that can take years. You can be driving past a piece of grass on your way home today and not realize that somebody's been working on building something there for 2.5 years already.
That's wild.
You're just seeing that plot of grass, right? And unfortunately, due to the cyclical nature of that industry, sometimes you can commit to building a neighborhood and then the economy went another way, right? And so I have seen multiple things where they got the streets in and the sewers in and the telephone lines in, and then the project just stalled. And now we have, a cul-de-sac to nowhere.
That sounds like an album title.
Yeah. I'm gonna make a note of that one.
Yeah, or cul-de-sac to nowhere.
But it just, it is like you said before, it's a long game. And so you've got to have the stomach to weather economic shifts and cycles and turmoil. That project that I told you took me 3.5 years. Part of it took 3.5 years because we were way deep into this project. It was an apartment complex in downtown Bradenton. We were way deep into the project. Everybody was committed. The money had become non-refundable, and then COVID.
Oh,
the world shut down. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody knew how to react. The supply chains got interrupted, right? And suddenly wood is way out, labor's through the roof, all this stuff happened.
Sheets of plywood for $800.
But this apartment complex developer bought this property because they looked at the size of the land, they looked at the cost of wood, of concrete, of doors, of labor, and they said it is going to cost X amount of dollars to acquire this property and build this building, right? Ergo, we will go under contract and we will buy the property and we will build our apartment complex. Suddenly, global interruption, right? Everything gets put on hold. And then suddenly, when we all come back from the cave of COVID, we're suddenly in a very different economic market due to supply chain interruptions. And suddenly, that same Excel spreadsheet is wildly different. And suddenly, the exact same building is now 28% more expensive to build. But the bank isn't going to give them a 28% increase in their loan. So they have to figure out what to do. Like, luckily, that project got through because we had the city of Bradenton and Manatee County and some federal agencies step in and create gap funding for the project to get it across the finish line. But what do you do when you are stuck in a situation like that where the real finite numbers that you came to build the project suddenly are different, drastically different before you can even break ground, and that's a very real thing in the world of commercial development.
Right, and that happens, I guess, somewhat in residential, but not nearly as often
because it moves faster.
Exactly.
So those hiccups don't quite, they can roll with the punches a little quicker. Yeah, I would say
that's wild. So
there's also the economy of scale, right? Because if you're building one site, these are your numbers, right? But if you're building 27 homes rather than one home, you can kind of
splay it
out a little easier and absorb it a little easier and adjust a little easier. So that's where I think they can be a little more light on their feet.
Right. That's interesting. That's very interesting. You mentioned if you're okay with roller coasters, you can come in. If you could venture a guess, why do you think the real estate world, almost irrespective of what it is so cyclical? You can count on it. When there's always more people, I mean, our population has expanded, so you think inherently everything would have to expand around it. Is it because these markets, regardless of how many people there are totally subjected to the state of our economy?
Yeah. At least in commercial, when the economy is good, people will want to invest more. If you are a business owner, if you own mom and dad's bike shop, right, and the economy is going good, and your bike shop is going good, you're going to think about opening up a second location because things are really good, right? Ergo, you're going to make an investment. So I have my bike shop in Bradenton. Things are going really good. I think I'm going to look at opening a bike shop in Sarasota, right? So you open up that second location. You're now adding to the economy because you've now have 2 retail locations. You've doubled your amount of employees. Hopefully you've doubled your amount of sales and income, right? And you're adding to the economy. If you are a real estate investor and you like acquiring properties, especially rental properties, like, buying small office buildings with tenants, a building like this, right? Someone owns this building. It's filled with tenants. It's generating rent. If he's managing his income and expenses here, he's making a profit at the end of the year with the tenants in this building, right? If the economy is going good and the interest rates are reasonable and the building, and since the economy is good, there's a lot of tenants in this building because all of their businesses are doing well because we've got a healthy economy. He's going to go, I think I'm going to buy a second office building because this one's doing really well, right? And then he'll add to the economy because he'll go buy a building from Joe that Joe bought in 1992 for $1.5 million. Now the years have gone by, Joe can sell that building for $3.5 million because he's improved it, he's filled it with tenants, it's operating well, and we're in a better economy and
Joe's ready to go.
Right? So the landlord of this building buys that building, right? And now, Joe, who just sold his building, now just made a profit of $2 million. What's he going to do? Well, he's going to go turn around and invest it in something else. And all these things just start generating more and more and more. Now, when the economy is suddenly cooling or, going bad, like, heck, we had a horrible hurricane season that kind of made everybody just hit pause and step back, right? That affected our economy. That created a hiccup in the economy. People are a little hesitant. Maybe I'm not going to go open that bike shop just yet. Maybe I'm not going to do my second location. Well, I don't know how interest rates are going to be. It's a little harder to get financing from the bank. I'm not sure if I'm going to buy that property. I'm just going to hold on to the one I've got. Then they're doing less, which, obviously slows things down. So people are always kind of trying to look into the future as far as, opportunities and all of the little different idiosyncrasies that going along with trying to do that. So it's probably my best take on it.
That's interesting too. But that begs another question for me, and the COVID thing made me think of it.
Sure.
because you were talking about office buildings. You see in bigger cities these office buildings that are just ghost towns. They had, floors and floors and floors of cubicles or whatever, and there's nothing in it now, or so much less of it now. So 2 things I want to ask about that. How much of any of that did we see around here? And one of the things that I've been noticing as a byproduct of that, it's been things like shopping malls and some even office buildings. They've been repurposed into things that nobody saw them coming. So I guess my 2 questions are, how much of that did we get around? How much ghost town office work did we see around here? And have you seen anything interesting in commercial properties being repurposed into new things that people didn't necessarily see coming?
So yes to both. That's a terrific question. So in 2021 through maybe 2023, I'm just going to talk about Bradenton, Sarasota, Tampa Bay area, right?
Right.
It was astonishing what we saw as far as we saw the opposite. Everything was filling up. Everything was going to 100% occupancy. All of these empty office spaces and retail spaces were being flooded. And initially when it first started, and I was like showing office properties day and night, I started going, what is going on here? So I started asking when I was showing properties to people, like, can I just ask, like, where are you from? What are you doing here? Why are you looking at office space? And the answer was the same almost every single time. Well, we just moved here from, I don't know, New Jersey, California, Oregon, whatever. They were all moving down from up north because for whatever reason, it was weather, economically driven. They were sick and tired of another winter in Minnesota.
Right.
Another thing that COVID brought on was remote work.
Right.
That I experienced a lot. So I'm showing an office to a guy, small office, and this story happened over and over. Why are you here? Well, I just came here from Pennsylvania. I work for this engineering firm. COVID made us all work remotely. And now that we're back open, the Pittsburgh firm said, we've learned that you can all work remotely. So that 20,000 square foot office building we have in Pittsburgh just kind of seems like a waste of money. You all can work remotely. And he's like, well, if I can work remotely, I'm going to move to Florida so I can work in the sunshine.
Yes, sir.
And people were doing that in droves. So they were moving their families down here. They were moving their homes down here. If they could work remotely, they were coming down here because the weather was so much, better. And so we saw a flood. We did not have ghost buildings in the Tampa Bay area. We had full buildings in the Tampa Bay area. And for the most part, they pretty much stayed. I mean, we had a little bit of recidivism on the backside of that. Part of that was due to the return to work policies. Like my work changed their mind. We all have to go back to the office. I have to go back to Pittsburgh. Right. It happened in certain cases. There's always going to be a little bit of the wave coming in and then going back out to sea. On the flip side, all those places like New Jersey, New York, places like that. San Francisco is probably the worst. I was reading I felt like I was reading in news stories, commercial news stories every day of another 20-story office building that was just empty.
Right. That's
because
what I'm
those
talking
metro
about.
areas, people were leaving and they were not coming back. So I think it was actually brilliant that they were repurposing them into apartment buildings and they were taking, shopping malls and repurposing them into new things. I mean, that's just adapting, right? Adapt or die. And it has forced, it has forced people like that. It's either you learn to roll with it or you're going to get passed by, right? So it's been pretty exciting to see how they're repurposing and reutilizing those.
Right.
But we in Florida have been very fortunate. We did not deal with that. We had the opposite problem. But funny enough, you can't build an office building right now and lease it for a rate that would make any sense because it's so expensive to build an office building. So we're not building any new offices right now because it's too expensive. I'd have to rent it for an amount of money that no one in their right mind would pay. So we had more people come in, filling up the office inventory that we already had,
right?
And nobody's making more of it. So all we've got is all we've got. And so I'll Office leasing prices have arisen because there's supply and demand, and there is not new supply, but there is more demand.
I was going to say, and the cost of building isn't coming down anytime soon, it doesn't look like.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get you out of here on something fun. Being one of the few guests that comes in that has been a lifelong Florida resident, you didn't move here from Pennsylvania or Wisconsin.
I was born in Canada, but we moved here when I was 8 months old, so I'm
fair enough.
I'm a full-blooded native, might as well be.
So you know the narratives, you know the things that have gone on around here, and the flux and the things that have changed, and I'm sure you've got a big part of your heart in downtown Bradenton where you're doing all this work. So if you could bring one thing or see one building or one thing change in downtown Bradenton that would make it more a vision you'd love to see, what is this building? What is this property?
It's already on its way.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I'm proud to say that when I left Michael Saunders after 10 years and started my own brokerage with some partners over at NDC.
Yeah, right. We had a whole conversation to get you on.
We are working with the city of Bradenton right now and another partner developer. The project is basically being called the City Center because it just hasn't, had a
clever name yet.
Yeah, right. Well, and it's also multi-pronged, but the city of Bradenton, the city government of Bradenton is in the process of selling City Hall on the waterfront, which is a large, parcel directly on the river. They are relocating their police station, which they already have. We're in the process of building a new police station right now, and so they're vacating that half the building and moving into a new police station. City Hall is currently actively trying to identify a new location. Being that they're more of a customer service driven entity, they have to try to find a location where the public can still come and pay their water bill and go to city council meetings. But once they find their new property to move City Hall to, that parcel is going to change into something amazing, which is going to be it's slated at the moment currently to become a hotel tower, a condominium tower, a multi-story apartment building on both sides of 12th and 10th, and then along the ground floor all the way down is going to be retails and shops and nightlife.
That'll be awesome.
And that is going to be, I think, a huge step forward, because the biggest change in the downtown core of Bradenton from today as it was 10 years ago is the population. 10 years ago, hardly anybody lived in downtown Bradenton. I feel like by 2030, the downtown population in downtown Bradenton will probably increase fivefold.
What do you think is the biggest contributing factor to that inevitability?
People are just realizing it's awesome to live downtown. I think the other part of it is, honestly, and I think you'll agree, downtown St. Pete is kind of getting built out. Like it's tons everywhere, and they're running out of room. I think we can agree that in downtown Sarasota, the building boom that hit downtown Sarasota over the last 5 years, they're kind of running out of dirt.
Big time. And they're talking about putting in even bigger buildings.
Right. And so suddenly you have St. Pete to the north, which is a very expensive, high in-demand area, right? Little more geared toward the younger demographic.
Right.
You've got downtown Sarasota, which is exploding and highly dense and in high demand, but more of a older, retiree-based, old money kind of demographic. That sweet spot right in the middle, demographically and geographically, is Manatee County and Bradenton.
Yeah, it sort of became that.
Same waterfront, same weather, same everything, a little bit more reasonable prices, because the demand isn't so high. And so I think downtown Bradenton is really coming into its own right now. And so as somebody who's so emotionally invested in that section, I am wildly excited for what, my little neck of the woods is turning into. Really, really excited.
Hell yeah.
Our office is smack dab in the middle of it, so I get to be part of it.
Well, we're excited for it too. We're happy to have Oscura be a place that we can
Yep.
have our events.
We need more music venues downtown.
We're happy to have one toe in the Bradenton world too. So, well, Ben, I can't thank you enough for coming down and enlightening us a bunch on the commercial real estate world. I would love to have you back and talk about NDC and some of the other things that you have going on.
To.
Yeah. So, you've always got a home here regardless. You're like twofold. You're our first guest. You're our first family member with two connections
right,
now.
I know.
So, as always, thank you so much,
Thank
brother.
You, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah.